Once upon a time there lived a brother and sister named Jack and Jill. They were very poor but always looked out for each other. One day while walking in the woods, they stumbled upon a tiny elf. The elf explained he was from the Rainbow Kingdom, a magical place high up in the clouds. He had escaped down to Earth but couldn't find his way back home. Jack and Jill felt sorry for the lost elf and decided they would help him return to the Rainbow Kingdom. The elf told them they would have to climb up a giant beanstalk that stretched all the way into the clouds. At the top was the entrance to the Rainbow Kingdom. The elf warned them it was a dangerous journey and they would have to pass many obstacles along the way. But Jack and Jill were determined to help their new friend. The next morning, Jack and Jill set off on their quest with the elf. When they reached the beanstalk, it was even bigger than they imagined. The stalk was thick as a tree trunk and disappeared high up into the clouds. With the elf's help, Jack and Jill began climbing up the twisting vines. As they climbed higher, the air grew thin, making it difficult to breathe. But the determined children kept climbing. About halfway up the beanstalk, a terrible storm hit. The wind howled fiercely, and rain pelted the vine. Jack and Jill held on tightly so they would not be blown away. A bolt of lightning struck the beanstalk, sending a crack all the way down the stalk. The beanstalk began shaking violently underneath them. They had to keep climbing though, or else they might fall all the way back down to Earth. Finally, after what seemed like forever, Jack, Jill and the elf reached the top of the beanstalk. They pulled themselves up into the clouds, wet and exhausted from their climb. But when they looked around, they could not believe their eyes. The most beautiful kingdom lay before them, with rainbow rivers, lollipop trees, and castles made of gold. "Welcome to the Rainbow Kingdom," the elf exclaimed. Jack and Jill followed the dirt path through the kingdom, crossing rainbow bridges over glittering rivers. The elf explained that at the end was the king's golden castle, where the magical pot of gold was kept. Along the way, they met talking animals, fairies, gnomes, and all sorts of peculiar creatures. Jill was so curious she almost wandered off the path, but Jack held her hand tightly so she would not get lost. When they arrived at the golden castle, the drawbridge opened and the king himself came out to greet them. He wore a shiny crown and a robe made of the softest velvet. The king welcomed Jack, Jill, and the elf to the Rainbow Kingdom and invited them to a magnificent feast. The long table was piled high with treats like candy apples, chocolate milkshakes, pizza, and chips. After filling their bellies, it was time to find the pot of gold. The king led them to a rainbow door deep within the castle. "Only those pure of heart can pass through to the treasure room," the king said. Jack and Jill looked at each other nervously. What if they couldn't get inside? Holding their breath, they stepped through the door together and shut their eyes. When Jack and Jill opened their eyes again, they found themselves in a room bursting with treasures. Mountains of gold coins, jewels of every color, and right in the center, the magical pot of gold. The pot of gold was even more magnificent than they imagined. It glowed bright as the sun and cast rainbow shimmers around the room. The elf explained one piece of the treasure would be enough to help their poor family and village forevermore. Jack grabbed one big gold coin while Jill scooped up a handful of colorful gems. Suddenly, alarms started blaring. They had been caught stealing treasure. Jack and Jill had to escape the castle fast with their stolen bounty. They dashed through the rainbow door, down the winding castle stairs with the guards hot on their trail. Blasts of magic whizzed over their heads as they ran. When they reached the beanstalk, Jill tripped and dropped the gems. The guards were catching up fast. So Jack hoisted his sister over his shoulder and scrambled down the beanstalk vines. As soon as their feet touched the ground, Jack whipped out his axe and started hacking away at the beanstalk. "Chop it down, hurry!" Jill yelled. Jack swung with all his might. The beanstalk shook and groaned as it started tipping over. They could hear the guards shouting as the beanstalk finally smashed down to earth with a thunderous boom, cutting off access to the Rainbow Kingdom forever. Jack and Jill high-fived, cheering excitedly with the single gold coin that would change their lives. The elf hugged them goodbye, thanking them for their help before magically disappearing back to his homeland. And Jack and Jill lived happily ever after with their family in a grand castle of their very own.